Okay, so we're finally moving on a little bit away from fractions, but we'll bring them back. And we're going to talk about adding and subtracting decimals. Again, something you would have learned last year in 6th grade. But when it comes to 7th grade, we're going to learn how to add and subtract decimals that have positive and negative numbers, okay? Let's break it down though. If you remember back to 6th grade, maybe even 5th grade, you have to be able to add and subtract decimals. When you add and subtract decimals, you have to remember to line up the decimals before you do any adding and subtracting. So for these first 3 examples I've already shown you, a lot of people like to use these grid marks here to help me line up my digits. So if you need that, let me know. But here, let's jump right in. So line up your decimals. So we have 136.95 and 52.7. Now, anytime you have one in this case where the 0.7 has 1 decimal place, but 0.95 has 2, you can always put what we call fillers, which means putting a 0 in the place value that's empty because it doesn't change the number. Now, this one wants us to add, and you want to start from the right and then go to the left, because then you might have to carry a tens place over. So let's start. 5 plus 0 is 5. 9 plus 7 is 16, but I'm going to carry that 1 because it adds 1 to the 1's place. 6 plus 2 is 8, plus that 1 is 9. 5 plus 3 is 8, and then it doesn't carry, so I just bring the 1 down. Then whenever we line up our decimals, I'm just going to bring my decimal place down. Let's do the same thing for here. This time it's subtraction, so you have to watch out for borrowing from the place value before. Again, start from right to left. So 3 minus 2 is 1. I cannot subtract 1 minus 2 without borrowing from the 7 to make it 6. And that adds a 10 to the 1, which makes it 11. So 11 minus 2 is 9. Bring down your decimal place. 6 minus 6 is 0. 8 minus 5 is 3. And 9 minus 8 is 1. So I have an answer of 130.91. Over here, again, anytime my decimal place does not match up, I add a 0 for a filler, and now I'm going to subtract. 7 minus 0 is 7. I cannot subtract 7 minus 9, so I'm going to borrow from the 6 to make it 5, which makes 7, adding 10, which is 17, and 17 minus 9 is 8. I cannot subtract 5 minus 9, so again, I'm going to borrow from the 5 before it and make it 4, which adds 10 to the 5, which is 15. 15 minus 9 is then 6, and then I can't subtract 4 minus 8, so I'm going to take 1 away from the 3 to make 4 14 by adding 10. 14 minus 8 is 6. And now, since I don't have 3 minus anything, I'm just going to bring the 3 down. Don't forget to bring your decimal place down. So decimals can definitely be tricky, especially if you have to borrow from the place value before. Now, what makes it different from 6th grade this year is you have to know how to add and subtract decimals that are positive and negative. So let's recap our integer rules. Remember, if they are the same sign, that means if they're both positive or both negative, I just add the numbers and use the same sign. But if they're different, which means if one's negative and one's positive, I'm going to actually subtract the numbers and then take the sign of the larger value. So let's start easy. Let's look at number 1. First things first, I see addition. Okay, so I'm going to look at my signs. They're both positive, so that means I'm actually just going to add. So don't forget to line up your decimals when you're adding. So 5 plus 3 is 8. Bring your decimal place down, and 4 plus 6 is 10. That's it. Look at number 2. There's addition. My answers are both, or my problem is both negative, so I'm just going to add since they're the same. So 1.8 and 1.6. Lined up your decimals. 8 plus 6 is 14. Bring down your decimal place. 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3. But be careful. Since they were both negative to begin with, my answer is also negative like we learned a couple of weeks ago. Number 3. There is addition. My signs are the same, so I'm going to add, and I'm just going to line up 3.7 and 6.5 using your decimal place. 7 plus 5 is 12. Bring your decimal place down, carry the 1. 6 plus 3 is 9, plus another 1 is 10. But be careful, since they're both negative to begin with, I need to make it my answer negative. So it's negative 10.2. Now let's change gears here. Yes, it's still addition, but one's positive and one's negative. That actually means I'm going to subtract them. When I subtract them though, I like my bigger number to be on top, so 11.8, and then I'm going to put my smaller or shorter value on the bottom, and now I can subtract. 8 minus 3 is 5, my decimal place stays, and I'd have to borrow from the 1 to make it 11. 11 minus 3 is 8. Now look at your bigger number. So absolute value just means which one of the numbers, like if they're both positive, which one is technically larger. On paper, which one looks larger? 11.8. And since it's larger, that means my answer is also negative because it carries over. Now, let's refresh our memory on subtraction. If you remember a couple weeks ago, we had to do KCC when we saw subtraction. Keep the first number the same, change the subtraction to addition, but change the second number to its opposite. So since it's negative, I'm going to make it positive. Now it's turned into an addition problem. And if you remember our addition, if they're the same, which means they're both positive, all I have to do is add. So I'm going to line up my decimals and add. 6 plus 1 is 7. Bring your decimal down. 7 plus 0 is 7. And bring down your 1. And since my question that was positive, my answer is positive, so 17.7. Let's keep going. Now, just because it's addition, you have to be careful. One's positive, one's negative. So I'm actually going to subtract. Now I'm going to put 15.7 on top since it's somewhat larger on paper. And now I'm going to subtract. 7 minus 2 is 5. I can't subtract 5 minus 9, so I'm going to make it 15. 15 minus 9 is 6. And then let's look at the signs. Which one is larger on paper? 15.7 is. And since it's negative, my answer is negative 6.5. And there it is. Now, this one's already addition, so I don't need to do KCC. Since it's already addition, look at your signs. Are they the same or different? Since they're both negative, that makes them the same. And since they're the same, that means all we do is add. So I'm going to line up my decimals and add. 6 plus 0 is 6. Bring down your decimal place. 5 plus 4 is 9. And 1 plus 1 is 2. Since my numbers were negative to begin with, my answers are also negative when I'm adding. Number 8. It's addition, so no KCC. My numbers are positive, so they're both the same, which means all I do is add. And I'm going to just line up my decimals and add. 8 plus 3 is 11. Put my decimal down. Carry the 1. 3 plus 2 is 5, plus another 1 is 6, and bring down my 1. Since they were positive to begin with, my answer is positive, so it's positive 16.1. Another one, it's already addition, so no KCC, but this time one's negative and one's positive, so that actually means I'm going to subtract. But since 10.7 is somewhat larger on paper, I'm going to put 10.7 on top, 2.5 lined up below it, and now I can subtract. 7 minus 5 is 2. Keep the decimal the same. 10 minus 2 is 8. And let's look at the signs. Since 10.7 is larger, that means my answer is positive, like 10.7. Here's another subtraction, so let's do KCC. Keep negative 8.8 the same. Change subtraction to addition, but I've got to change 3.4 to negative. Now I've turned it into an addition problem. Are they the same or different? Because of the KCC, I've now made them the same, which means they're both negative. Since they're both the same, I'm not going to subtract. I'm actually going to add. So line up your decimals. 8 plus 4 is 12. Carry the 1. Bring down your decimal. 8 plus 3 is 11. Plus the 1 is 12. Now, since they were both negative to begin with, that means my answer is negative. So it's negative 12.2. Number 11. They're already addition, but notice one's positive, one's negative. So that actually means I'm going to subtract. I want my 17.6 to go on top because of the subtraction. And that's larger or longer, if you will. Now I can subtract. 6 minus 2 is 4. Carry down your decimal. 17 minus 8 is 9. And I look at the larger value, which would be 17.6. So that means my answer is negative 9.4. Here's another addition, so I don't have to do KCC. Notice they're different. One's positive, one's negative. So that actually means I'm going to subtract. 9.0 is larger than 7.4, so I'm going to put it on top. I can't do 0 minus 4, so I'm going to borrow from the 9 to make it 8, which makes the 0 10. 10 minus 4 is 6. Bring down your decimal. And 8 minus 7 is 1. 9 is larger absolute value, so it's positive, which means my answer is positive. And then it gets pretty repetitive, but I'm going to talk about the different cases here. You can stop the video if you want. I'm just going to play with this one and see like if it was an actual problem. Each of the cards on the left have the same solution as the ones on the right. So we're going to solve each one and then determine which ones are the same. So let's start with letter A. Letter A is subtraction. So I'm going to do K, C, C. Keep, change, change. Because of that, I've turned it into an addition problem, but now one's positive and one's negative. So I'm going to have to actually subtract. I'm going to line up 3.788 on top of 2.078 because 3 is larger than 2. Now I can subtract. 8 minus 8 is 0, 7 minus 7 is 0, 7 minus 0 is 7, and 3 minus 2 is 1. Notice 3.778 is larger, so it's positive, which means card A is 1.700. B, another subtraction, so K, C, C, keep, change, change. And notice because of the addition, now they're different. Because they're different, I'm actually going to subtract. But because I'm going to subtract, I'm going to put 8.34 on top minus 7.15. Now I'm going to subtract. I can't do 4 minus 5, so I'm going to borrow from the 3 to make it 2 and make the 14 10, or 4 14. 14 minus 5 is 9. 2 minus 1 is 1. Bring my decimal place down. And 8 minus 7 is 1. Now, if I look at it, which one's larger? Technically, 8.34 is larger, so that means my answer is negative as well. Moving to C. KCC because of the subtraction. Keep, change, change. Now, because of the addition and changing the signs, now one's negative and one's positive, which actually means I'm going to subtract on C. Since 20.224 is larger, I'm going to put it on top and 8.6 and go below it. Remember, if I have some filler blanks, then I'm going to put some zeros. 4 minus 0 is 4. 2 minus 0 is 2. Oops. And I can't do 2 minus 6, so I'm going to have to borrow from 20, which makes that 19. And 12 minus 6 is 6. Then 19 minus 8 is 11. Let's look at which one's larger. The 20 is larger, which is positive, which means my answer is positive 11.624. Letter D, KCC. Because of the KCC, now they're both negatives. And because they're both negatives, that actually means I'm going to add. So it doesn't matter how I line up, it doesn't matter which number's on top with addition. I'm just going to add them up by lining up my decimals. 3 plus 7 is 10. 8 plus 5 is 13 plus 1 is 14. Put the decimal down, carry the 1, and 3 plus 1 is 4. Now, because they were both negative, though, my answer would also be negative. Now, let's do the right side to find our matching answers. E, K, C, C. Notice now one's negative and one's positive, so that actually means I'm going to subtract. Since 2.4 is larger than 1.21, I'm going to put it on top, but I'm going to need a place filler, so I'm going to put 0 there, and now I can subtract. Since I can't do 0 minus 1, I'm going to borrow from the 4 to make it 3. 10 minus 1 is 9, 3 minus 2 is 1, and 2 minus 1 is 1. Since 2.4 is larger on paper, 2.4 is negative, which means my answer is negative 1.19. Well, there's our first match, B and E. So card B and card E match with the solution of negative 1.19. Letter F, K, C, C. Since I did the KCC, one's positive, one's negative. So that means I'm actually going to subtract. 6.9 is larger, so I'm going to put it on top. 9 minus 5 is 4. Bring the decimal down. 6 minus 2 is 4. Since 6.9 is larger and it's negative, that means my answer is negative 4.4. Now, when I go to look for my matching answer, it's a little odd because this one's really close, but this one has 4.40 and this one has 4.4. Remember, zeros are like fillers. If I put a 0 at the end after a decimal, it doesn't change the value. So D and F are the same. They have a value of negative 4.4. Letter G, K, C, C. Since one's positive, one's negative, that actually means I'm going to subtract. 16.324 is larger, so I'm going to subtract 4.7 and use zeros as fillers. 4 minus 0 is 4. 2 minus 0 is 2. I can't do 3 minus 7, so I'm going to borrow from the 6 and make it 13. 13 minus 7 is 6. 5 minus 4 is 1, and bring down the other one. Since 16.324 is larger and it's positive, my answer is 11.624. Notice it matches C, so C matches G with the value of 11.624, which means we can assume that H matches letter A with the same value of 1.7. Adding, subtracting decimals, line up your decimals, pay attention to your signs, especially when there are negatives.